In this lesson, I'm going to talk about my editing process. And if we consult back to the previous video about workflow, where I've got my post-shoot, my shoot, and then, my pre-shoot, my shoot, and then my post-shoot. In the post-shoot, there's a little edit section. And that edit section is where I make my selects. I do my developing and my base processing on my photos, and I export those photos off to however I'm going to distribute them. So this is just going to focus on that specific area and using Lightroom specifically. It all starts with the root folder that's created wherever I'm creating all my files. The filing name for this is that I've got the year, the month, the day, and then it's got the project name. I've got inside of that folder, there's the raw folder where I do my entire dump. I've got my catalog folder where my Lightroom catalog is residing, and then I've got my export folder. So this is where everything starts, and this is where I start to pull. So when I'm backing things up, I've just got one folder that I'm moving around, and I don't have to worry about all of the extra files. Everything just resides inside that one folder. So now jumping into Lightroom, when we're inside of Lightroom, what we want to do is we're going to import our photos into here. Now for demonstration purposes, I've already imported in, because when you do an import, what happens is that Lightroom has to create a preview file of that, and that can sometimes take some time depending on the amount of files that you have. So just to speed up the process, it's already imported. But once we're in Lightroom, you're in the library module. In the lower left-hand corner, click import, and you're going to get the import dialog box that pops up. In this import dialog box, you can drill down in the document tree on the left-hand side here to where the files actually reside, and you can select the files that you want. Now these ones are going to be grayed out, and that's just because they've already been imported in, and Lightroom doesn't want to have the same copy, the file multiple times across. So it saves you some space when you're doing this. Up on the the right-hand side where we've got my metadata, we want to make sure that we're going to add metadata to this. And this is where we can start to go in and we can start to do presets. So I'm going to click on Edit Presets, and it's going to open up the preset editor. I'm going to load in my 2020 My Information, and we've got basic information. In the IPTC Copyright and Creator section is where I really focus on. I'm putting the year, my name, the copyright, my URL, where I'm located. It's just and this is great to have as a preset, so when you're always importing, you can always pull this information in right off the bat. You don't have to remember it every time. So if you're going to do something more than one time, it's good to have a preset for it. That's just to kind of speed up that process that you need. So I'm going to now just click done here. This is going to be up. I'm going to apply this information. The next area that I'm going to add is I'm going to add some keywords. So inside of keywords, this is where I'm going to type in things like live music, Rogers Place. So the type of shot it was, where I shot it, the band. So I've got the Distillers and I've got Alexis on Fire. And I'm going to add that, and that gets added to the files right off the bat. You can do this later on as well, but this is nice just to do a base, big, broad sweep of adding these keywords. And that allows us, when we export this into another catalog and we're looking at our main year catalog or month catalog, we can drill down really quickly into the artists. I'm going to click cancel. And that's going to get me back into my library module here. Now that I'm in my library module, all my raw files are imported. It's a big dump of files, so all I want to do is just a little bit of organization. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to organize these by bands. I'm going to select all the Distillers photos, and then I'm going to right click on the raw folder, and on the right click menu I'm going to select create folder inside raw, and I'm going to call it the Distillers. I'm going to make sure that include selected photos is selected, and I'm going to click create. And what it's going to do is it's going to create a new folder. It's actually going to create this in your document structure as well, but it just keeps the organization. It's a really fast way to organize it. And it moved just those Distillers photos inside of the Distillers folder. So now I'm not looking at 1,200 photos, I'm only looking at 512, which is still a lot, but I'm going to go through the process on how I drill down to get this really quick, these selects done, in the fastest possible time. It's an iterative process, so that means that I don't try to get the final selects done right off the bat. I'll drill down, and the nice thing about using Lightroom or even Capture One and most raw editors is they allow you rating systems. So Lightroom has flags, so there's a flag system, and then there's stars, so you got 1 to 5 stars, and then you've got colors as well to start to isolate your pictures, and you can filter those all out, which allows you to like just really isolate the photos that you're going to be working on. So when I'm doing this, the first thing that I do is I go through and I flag photos, and how flagging works is it's a toggle. So as I press it, you can see it's going remove flag, add flag, so flag is pick, and I'm just going to go off of feeling. I'm going off of just base composition and how I'm looking at these pictures from a far away view. I'm not looking at them really close in. I don't care about real technical things yet. I'm going to worry about that as I start drilling down, and I need to get more specific with my edit. So once I go through these 512, I can go down in the lower left hand corner, and there's a filter area. And if I click that area, it's just going to show me the flagged photos. Now over to the left hand side of that, it'll tell me the amount of photos that I have. So I've got 96 of 512. So I've like cut it down to 1/5 the amount of photos right now, which is pretty cool. So now with this filter, I'm not looking at all 512. I'm only looking at 96 of them, and I'm going to go through this process again. And now I'm going to start to use the stars. So I'm going to go with my number 1 key. I'm going to go and I'm going to add a star. So when I like a picture, and I can select multiple pictures that are similar, and what I can do is I can press N on the keyboard, which is survey mode, and that resides up in the view menu as well. You've got survey or you've got grid. N and G are keyboard shortcuts you're going to use a lot, and I can take a look at these photos side by side to really isolate them, and then I can select the one that I want and I can set its rating. Press G to get back to grid view, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to do that for all these 96 photos. So now that I've gone through and done this 1 star, I can filter down to my 1 stars, and now I'm down to 35. So I've 1/3 of that again. So I'm down to 35 from 512, and I'll go through this one more time, and now I'll start to look at the photos a little bit closer. So what I'll do is I'll really get that N button, I'll press the N key, and I'll really take a look and start to look more at technical aspects of things, making sure composition's right, what's the focus like, those types of things, to get really start to get a little bit more picky. Not super picky yet, but just a little more picky. So now I drill down into 2. Now I've got 21, so I've cut back a good chunk of photos already, and I'm going to go that pass one more time. So I'm going to get between 10 to 15 photos. That's a good number just for me when I have to submit my stuff. Sometimes you just want to get down to 1 photo, and that'll take a little bit more time. But just keep doing this as an iterative process. And what's nice about doing this as an iterative process is when you submit your selects, your highest ranking selects, if your client comes back to you and then says, you know what, do you have any more photos? Do you have any more photos of the bass player or any more photos of the drummer? Now you can go back and filter this down to your 2 stars and see, do I have any more of the drummer? I do. And then I can start to pull those out, or I can even go back to 1 star all the way back to flags. But so I don't have to go back to the 512. I'm just going back to that limited amount of photos that I have selected. Speeds up the process greatly. So now that I'm here and I'm working in I've got my photos selected, I'm going to go through and I'll develop those photos. So that's just basic processing of it, nothing too heavy. So in the develop module, I'll click on the develop module. I'm going to focus on this basic area, which is the top tab over on the right hand side. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the picker for the white balance, and I'm just going to adjust my white balance a bit. You can see it took a little bit more of that red cast out. I'm going to play with my exposures. Okay, not too bad. It's a little bit washy, so I'm going to increase the contrast, bring down the highlights a bit. Blacks, and what I'm doing is I'm looking at the photograph. I'm not worrying too much about what the actual slider value is. I'm worrying about, there we go. I'm going to take a look at that, and good. And this is where I want to be at. Perfect, just so I can bring that contrast up in that area where I want it to be. Excellent. Then I can start drilling down into more of these higher end retouches and these edits that I need to do, but majority of the stuff that I'm doing, the basic tab is going to take care of those sorts of things for me. So now that I've gone through all my pictures, I've done my basic edits, I'm liking what I'm getting with these photos. I'm going to jump back into my library. So now that I've got all of my 11 photos, I'm going to select them all. And if we look up at the top here, you can see it's just got the default file name, which is the file name that came out of my camera. I'm going to go up to the library and select rename photos. And here you've got some presets that you can create. And I've created a preset where I've got a sequence, the custom text, and then the file name. So I'll put in the custom text, I'll put in the same naming convention of the day, so 2020 at 2:04. I've got the distillers, and then if you look at the bottom here, the example is that it's got 001, so it's got the sequence, the date, the name of the project, the original file name, and I'll go OK. And what it's going to do is it's going to change all the file names. You can go back to your original file names as well by going up to selecting your photos, going rename photos, and there's an actual original file name here selection. You do that and it'll take you right back to the original file name, which is really handy in case you make a mistake. It's nice that you get to have an out. So I'm going to come back to here and rename those photos back to that sequence. Perfect. And now that this is done, one last step is I'm just going to click my export and get my export done. When I select the export in the library module, I've got a preset window that I can start to set up, and I can create recipes for my exports. So what I'm going to do here is this is going to be output for usually for social media. So these usually go on to like Instagram 1080 on the long edge is what they want. Resolution, I always keep at about 300 because it doesn't affect the overall file size. It just means that if this is going to go to print, it's just going to have that resolution right off the bat. My image format is going to be JPEG. It's going to be, I'm going to keep sRGB. I'm going to change it to sRGB because that's for screen. Color mode, resize long edge to 180. I'm not going to sharpen anything. I don't add watermarks to anything. So now that I have this, what I can do is I can create this as a preset. So I'm going to click add. And here under folders, I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to go 2020 presets, just so we know. And this one is going to be 1080 JPEG. Good. Boom. And inside 1080 JPEG resides. I can select it. So we can select what we want to do. It's going to just keep all of the settings that we have when we're doing this. And when I click export, it's going to ask me where I want to save my file to. So it's going to say choose. I'm going to select choose. Inside of my my Finder, I'm going to go to my export folder. I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to go 1080 just so we know what these ones are. I'm going to choose, boom, go done, and then my export is going through. Now once this is all done and my export, sometimes it can take a while. That's one of the complaints about Lightroom, is that their export can sometimes take a kind of a painful amount of time. But once now these files get exported into this folder here as they're starting to pop up, now the project is done, all I do is plug in my external hard drive, and then I can drag this folder onto that external hard drive, and everything is good to go. All the links and everything reside. I can email and I can upload my my JPEGs. Everything's named properly. Everything's exported to the proper quality that I need it to be. So remember that when you're selecting, it's an iterative process. That's the big thing to take from this, is just don't try to get those perfect photos done first. Just keep drilling down and really focus on the positive. Don't focus on the ones that don't matter. Focus on the photos that do matter.